Starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Operator Certification 101 webinar brought to you by EPA and the Association of State Drinking Water Administrators. I am your technical host, Anthony DeRosa, and I just wanted to give you guys some introductory information. We're going to be accepting questions which you can submit to the panel at any time throughout the presentations by using the questions panel on your webinar control panel. At the end of both presentations, we will read out the questions and have the presenters answer them. Any questions that we don't get to answer or address on the broadcast will be submitted to the panelists, and we'll provide a Q&A document shortly after the end of the webinar. The presentations and slide deck will also be made available on the ASDA website shortly after the session. So with that, I will turn it over to EPA.
Thank you, Anthony. Good afternoon, everybody. This is Maria Lopez Carbro over at EPA headquarters in Washington, D.C. And I just wanted to take the time to thank everybody for coming today and welcoming you to this session. We have very great presenters, Bob Dunleavy for OPSERT today, which will be very exciting. And I'm just super excited that we're doing this. As you know, usually before we do our workshops, we try to do some type of what we call either pre-training or webinar events, where we talk about some of the basic programs, requirements regarding capacity development and operator certification. It just provides a good basis and a good framework for all of us before we really go into the workshop and quote-unquote get our hands dirty and do some work in that sense. So I think in 2010 we did it in person. This year we're doing a webinar. We're embracing our technologies and seeing how that can help us out. As most of you know, our 2015 National Capacity Development and Operator Certification Workshop is scheduled for December 8th through the 10th in Dallas, Texas. I'm hoping all of you will be able to join us. It's going to be great discussions. I do want to take an opportunity to thank the Workshop Planning Committee for all their hard work and dedication in making these events possible. Not only the webinar today, but also the workshop and helping us with agendas and presenters. Some of those names are Michelle, Kathy Tocavogel, Armando, Scott, Curtis, Janine, Jennifer, Amy, Bridget, as well as Jim. I know some of you are on the call today. So thank you all so much for your hard work and dedication to making this happen. The theme of the workshop this year is Roadmap to the Future, Building Sustainability and Integrating Resiliency. We have great topics and great speakers on the agenda. We're going to have the state of Florida sharing their veteran recruitment program. We're going to talk about the value of contract operators for small utilities. We're going to dig in a little bit into math and chemistry training courses. We often hear that it's a big challenge for operators to pass math and chemistry. So it's basically taking a look at that and seeing what are some enhancements that we can do. I used to work at a wastewater treatment plant, and I remember having to train the operators, and that was definitely something that even when they could do it in the field, they were just so intimidating to going into a room and taking a test. So it's like, how do we get around that, or how do we kind of tackle that challenge? This workshop is also going to talk a little bit about water system partnerships, resiliency planning. As you know, we're having more natural disasters. There was an article, or I should say a radio show, about 2 weeks ago on NPR that was talking about how hurricanes have become one of the #1 most costly events in the U.S. Just, the impact that they have in the communities, and also just the amount of funding that it takes to just get those communities back in play. So, and we all know the importance that water and wastewater serves in our communities. So it's very important to build our resiliency as climate change takes some impact in our lives. So the workshop is designed to provide plenty of time for interactive discussions, brainstorming ideas, and overall networking. So I hope that everybody that's joining us today is also going to be able to join us at the actual workshop in December. If you haven't registered yet, I do want to take the time to point you to the ASDWA website, asdwa.org. You'll have registration information as well as an agenda there. I'm excited. I hope I get to see all of you there. With that said, I'm peeking in here and looking at our attendee list. It looks like we have a pretty big attendance, which is always great and exciting. I'm seeing that there's a lot of states registered. I see Navajo Nation is also registered. I see Virgin Islands. That's pretty awesome. I'm even seeing 4 people from Georgia, and we have some people from Jersey. That's great. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. And again, I just wanted to thank you all for joining us, thank the committees for helping us plan this, and also just share some of my enthusiasm. Like I said, I helped plan the 2010 workshop, and it was such a great event, and I'm looking so forward to doing the 2015 one. With that said, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Bridget. Bridget, are you on the line?
I surely am.
Thank you, Bridget. It's over to you.
Thanks, Maria. I would like to add my welcome to everybody. Thank you so much for finding time to join us as we kind of do some of the pre-conference work today. But it is my distinct honor to introduce to you our first presenter, Bob Dunleavy, whom many of you already know, is an environmental engineer at EPA Region 7, and he's been there for about 25 years. Bob is known for being one of the original regional coordinators for capacity development and operator certification, and has supported the states in his region for both of these programs. When not engaged with CapDev and/or OpCert, Bob also dabbles in wellhead and source water protection, the PWSS program, the RTCR, and serves as the contact for the Region 7 Environmental Finance Center at Wichita State University. And when not up to his eyeballs in regulations, Bob tells me that he still enjoys a good float trip on a river or taking his canoe on the lake. So he's a real Huck Finn throwback. Thanks, Bob. Let's hear from you.
Thanks, Bridget. Appreciate that. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for taking the time out today. Good morning to some of you. Good afternoon to others. This is the first of 2 webinars to provide new and experienced operators and capacity development coordinators to learn and reacquaint themselves with the operator certification program fundamentals before the 2015 national workshop. And as nothing's working. Okay, so really there are 2 objectives here. One is to review the basics, and the other one is to promote collaboration between the state coordinators and also with the EPA coordinators as well. Trying to work through these, just the basics, looking at the statutory background of operator certification, the actual operator certification program and baseline standards, some of the implementation and other issues that we've encountered along the way, and interaction between the programs, especially with capacity development and other programs in the drinking water area. So first we're going to start with the statutory background, and of course the first thing we got to talk about is the 96 amendments, and of course just briefly it enhanced what was done with the 86 amendments with the Safe Drinking Water Act, many different pieces on it. But specifically what we want to talk about is where did the operator certification program come from? Well, first of all, we have to talk about the Drinking Water State Revolving Loan Fund. That's what the 96 amendments did. It established the Drinking Water State Revolving Loan Fund, and one of the things it did was provide loans to water supply set-asides, program assistance, training and certification of operators, assistance to tribal water supplies, just a myriad of different items that could be paid for through the loan program. Specifically, though, and what I wanted to focus on here is 2 parts in the revolving loan program, which are conditions in order for a state to receive its full allotment: the operator certification program and the capacity development program. And when you look at this, and I just briefly mentioned this, if you want to look at these parts, it's actually in 40 CFR, the Code of Federal regulations, Part 35, which is actually the grant program for the environmental programs. So anyway, we look at that, and each one of those programs is worth 20% of the grant allotment. I did also want to mention, too, is that for a condition for a system to receive a loan, if a system lacks technical, managerial, and financial capabilities to ensure compliance with the requirements of the Act, unless the assistance will ensure compliance and the owners or operators, and I just want to underline operators, of the systems agree to undertake feasible and appropriate changes in operations to ensure compliance over the long term. One of the things I found out, I took a quick look at, 20% overall is anywhere between $1.6 and $15 million depending on the state. And just briefly, there are four set asides, and each one of these can do some provide some assistance to the operator certification program, whether it be directly for the training and certification or for the program. With that, let's get right to the operator certification program. And okay, in the Safe Drinking Water Amendments 1996, it's in section 1419, A through D, basically developing guidelines, then for the states, EPA to issue, and then the states adopt the guidelines, the use of existing state programs to meet the guidelines, and also there was a reimbursement of training and certification costs for small systems in community and non-transient, non-community water systems. So what we have here is developing the guidelines first. Okay, you have two work groups. So you have a state EPA work group, you have a National Drinking Water Advisory Council. They met between March of 1997 through August of 1998, and really this is called a partnership, which included environmental public interest advocacy groups, drinking water programs, EPA, other groups, and public water supplies. One of the overarching objectives that this group was given was what's to become the public health objectives. As they were considering the different issues coming up during the discussion, they had to make sure that customers of any public water systems be provided with an adequate supply of safe potable water. Customers are confident that their water is safe to drink, and public water system operators are trained and certified, and that they have knowledge and understanding of the public health reasons for drinking water standards. The results, final guidelines for the certification and recertification of community and non-transient, non-community public water systems, which was issued on February 5th of 1999. And what I'm going to do here, this is one of the pieces where I started looking at it, and I really have to kind of focus on what the baseline standards say. I'm going to focus first on the anti-backsliding, and we use that even today, that initially what a state had as far as their requirements for operator certification that existed 12 months prior to the development of the guidelines, the state could not reduce that in order to bring it down to meet the guidelines. They had to keep it where it was unless the reductions could be justified by the state and approved by EPA. And we continue looking at that even today when we get new regulations in place. 9 baseline standards, and I'm just going to go through these, each one by one. Of course, these are the 9 baseline standards, and let's just go through them. Start with authorization. Each state must have legal authority to implement the program as evidenced by an Attorney General certification or certification from delegated counsel. The authority requires the certification of operators of all community and non-transient, non-community water system, and that states comply with the appropriate requirements of the program. Baseline standard 2, classification of system facilities and operators. States must classify all community and non-transient, non-community water systems based on indicators of potential risks. These indicators include complexity size source water for treatment facilities and complexity size for distribution systems. Each state must develop specific operator certification renewal requirements for each level of classification. And then there's require owners of all community and non-transient water, non-community water systems to place the direct supervision of their water system, including each treatment facility and or distribution system, under the responsible charge of an operator holding a valid certification equal to or greater than the classification of the treatment facility and or distribution system. Require that all operating personnel making process control system integrity decisions about water quality or quantity that affect public health be certified. Require that a designated certified operator be available for each operating shift. Baseline Standard 3 operator qualifications. State must require the following for an operator to become certified. Take and pass an exam that demonstrates the operator has the necessary skills, knowledge, and ability and judgment as appropriate for the classification. All exam questions must be validated. Have a high school diploma or general equivalency diploma. States may allow experience and or relevant training to be substituted for a high school diploma or GED. Education, training, or experience that is used to meet this requirement for any class certification may not be used to meet the experience requirement. Have the defined minimum amount of on-the-job experience for each appropriate level of certification. The amount of experience required increases with each classification level. Post-high school education may be substituted for experience. Credit may be given for experience in related fields, example wastewater. Experience that is used to meet experience requirement for any class of certification may not be used to meet the education requirement. Okay, within the Baseline Standard 3 operator qualifications is also grandparenting. And the grandparenting was to be used because some of these systems had good operators, but they were not certified. And these operators were to be able to be grandparented in place. They could not move from the system, and if they did, they would have to be certified at the level of the system that they joined. So this was actually provided so that systems could retain the operators that they had. And it was permitted for only those existing operators. System owners must apply for grandparenting within 2 years of the effective date of the state's regulations. Certification for the grandparented operator must be site-specific, non-transferable, and then within a certain time period must meet the renewal requirements. And the class of the plant or distribution system changes to an higher level, the grandparented certification is no longer valid. Baseline Standard 4 enforcement. So states with primary enforcement responsibility for the public water supervision program must have regulations that meet requirements of these guidelines and require community water systems and non-transient non-community water systems to comply with the state operator certification. States must have the ability to revoke operator certifications, and states must have the ability to suspend operator certifications or take other appropriate enforcement actions for operator misconduct. Baseline Standard 5, certification renewal. States must establish training requirements for renewal based on the level of certification held by the operator. States must pay special attention to identify specific renewal requirements for grandparented operators to ensure they possess the knowledge, skills, ability, and judgment to properly operate the system. This must be done by one or more of the following approaches or by an alternative approach approved by EPA. States may specify renewal requirements for grandparented operators on a case-by-case basis, taking into consideration factors such as the system's compliance history and operator experience and knowledge. And I have this highlighted. For systems that have a history of being out of compliance, any certification renewal decision should consider whether non-compliance is the result of actions or inactions by the system's owner or the system's operator. Next, states must require all operators included grandparented operators to acquire necessary amounts and types of state-approved training. And I have this highlighted. States may determine other requirements as deemed necessary. Next, states must have a fixed cycle of renewal not to exceed 3 years. States may require specific training requirements for certification renewal at the first renewal cycle for grandparented operators. This training should include all of the information covered by the initial certification exam for the system classification level for which the operator was grandparented, even though an initial certification exam may not be required for certification renewal. The state must also require an individual to recertify if the individual fails to renew or qualify for renewal within 2 years of the date that the certificate expired. States may require operators with grandparented certificates to meet all the initial certification requirements for the classification level for which the operator was grandparented and thereby obtain certification within a reasonable time period specified by the state. Baseline Standard 6, resources needed to implement the program. States must provide sufficient resources to adequately fund and sustain the operator certification program. Components of resources include, but not limited to, staff, data management, testing, enforcement, administration, and training approval. EPA recommends that states establish a dedicated fund that is self-sufficient. Baseline Standard 7, recertification. States must have a process for recertification of individuals whose certification has expired for a period exceeding 2 years. The process must include a review of the individual's experience and training and re-examination. I have this highlighted. An individual is not certified with an expired certificate. The state may develop more stringent requirements for recertification for individuals whose certificate has been expired, been revoked, or been suspended. For time periods for recertification of expired, revoked, or suspended certifications, also varies from state. But usually the expired or suspensions usually range from between 6 months to 2 years. Time periods can differ between expiration, revocation, suspensions within one state program. Stakeholder involvement. Stakeholder involvement is important to the public health objectives of an operator certification program. Stakeholder involvement ensures the relevancy and validity of the program and the confidence of all interested parties. States must include ongoing stakeholder involvement in the revision and operation of state operator certification programs. To note, public comment on rule revisions is not adequate stakeholder involvement, and a stakeholder board or advisory committee is strongly recommended by EPA. Examples of stakeholders may include operators, environmental public health groups, general public, consumer groups, technical assistance providers, utility managers, trainers, and others. And last, baseline Standard 9 is program review. States must perform reviews of their operator certification programs. EPA recommends that states perform internal reviews every 3 years and external peer reviews every 5 years. Examples, items to review include regulations, exam items for relevancy and validity, compliance, enforcement, budgeting and staffing, training relevancy, training needs through examination, performance, and data management systems. Now, part of the program, or part of the baseline standards also talk about initial program submittal and annual submittals. And basically, for the initial submittal, state attorney general certification full description and explanation of how the program ensures compliance, and a copy of the state operator certification regulations. For the annual submittals, one of the basics here is on the documentation evaluation of ongoing program implementation is from the statute, and that it meets the requirements of the guidelines. And just to let you know, the new State Attorney General certification is required for any changes in regulations or statutes. One of the things to let you know is all programs were approved by the summer of 2002. So now that we've gone through the baseline standards, then we had to get into the implementation. So one of the early issues was temporary certification. And going back to the baseline standards and some other things, first of all, as I went through the information long time ago in some emails and notes, there really wasn't a huge pool of operators with temporary certifications. But what I saw was about 21 states had temporary certification programs. And the issue was, okay, first of all, temporary certification does not, either the operator does not have either education experience or has taken or passed an exam, or a combination of those. But one of the things in the baseline standards is a statement in the beginning. EPA intends to use the public health objectives in its review and evaluation of state operator certification programs and its determination as to whether the state program meets the requirements of the guidelines. And this is the basis for where what we have used in order to determine if temporary certification does meet those guidelines. And then, of course, one of the other things we had to start developing too for the implementation is what do we need for the initial submittal contents. And if you go online, you can actually get the implementation guidance which you developed, which actually has a crosswalk for the operator certification program. In addition, there was another Federal Register notice for the final additions to the final guidelines for the certification and recertification of operators in community and non-transient, non-community public water systems. Final allocation methodology for funding to states for the operator expense reimbursement grants program. And so really this established the schedule for, and this is for the withholding, because this is where the grants program comes into this. The idea of withholding determinations for the initial submittals when they needed to be submitted and for the annual programs. And so it gave a consistent date for all the states. It did provide the states with sufficient time to make changes to the programs and allowed for program approval and withholding decisions to be made in the future. And just to highlight this, if you take a look at that final additions guideline, it basically says that EPA must approve the annual submittal on or before September 30th of each year. So just to kind of, as I hear from other state coordinators when their states give them their program on the 30th of September, it might be good to get it in earlier. What it also did, it deleted the term validated exam because you can only validate exam questions, not the exam itself. And then it also provided the allocation methodology and process to award the grants for the operator expense reimbursement grant. Going to that, just quickly because it is over with, but there were a lot of things that really helped the state operator certification programs. Basically, it was for the cost of training, and it reimbursed the states for the cost of training and certification for operators and systems of population 3,300 or less, including an appropriate per diem for unsalaried operators. And just to show you, there are many things that it's used for, but to highlight, develop better drinking water operator curricula, databases for certified operators to help with the managing of the certified operator program, implementing mobile training units for operator certification, and then also offering classroom and online training. Now it says authorized to provide a total of $30 million for each year, which is basically $180 million. It actually, after the methodology was developed, it was a little over $134 million and eventually ended up to $125 million for all the states and tribes. So now I want to get into a little bit here of the interaction of programs, and then I'll finish this up. But the drinking water program is not a stagnant program, and the operator certification needs to be aware of the activities going on in the drinking water program. Specifically right now, one of the biggest rule changes is coming about, the revisions to the total coliform rule, which will become effective on April 1st of 2016. But just to kind of throw out some other things, harmful algal blooms and Legionella are under consideration now. And just to throw in the capacity development program can help with some of these changing activities. And working with the capacity development program can be very advantageous, not only to gain access to many of the differences that are going on, the different activities going on in the drinking water program, but also can help with some of the funding as part of a capacity development strategy. So just to go into it real quick, what is capacity? The ability to plan for, achieve, maintain compliance with drinking water standards. Basically, you're looking at technical, managerial, and financial capacity. I hope many of you have heard that before. A lot of times you call it the three-legged stool, and of course, if you lose a leg, you kind of fall over. So just real quick, elements, and just a quick plug for the November 5th webinar coming up. There'll be more in-depth information on each of these, the definitions of technical capacity, managerial capacity, financial capacity, but I just want to highlight certain things here right now. Elements of technical capacity, I want to help highlight the technical knowledge part, effective operation maintenance led by certified operator. Managerial capacity, I want to highlight staffing and organization. Operator meets operator certification requirements. And then financial capacity criteria, and this is one of the bigger things I hear from operators all the time, especially at small systems. Basically revenue sufficiency and fiscal management and controls. So the idea that the system has enough money to pay an operator, and when you consider the public health protection that operator provides, and not only that operator is also considered a first responder. Just to show you where it fits in with the statute, that the New Systems program, first of all, New Systems is focused also on new community and non-transient non-community water systems commencing operations after October 1st, and that they demonstrate technical, managerial, and financial capacity. I believe that this also means that the certified operator is necessary. Existing system strategy. Okay, the state is developing and implementing a strategy to assist public water systems. Now this does include transients in acquiring, maintaining technical, managerial, and financial capacity. And what I want to focus on here is, so when the states had to develop their strategy, they had to consider and use, as they deem necessary, these 5 elements. And one of them, which I highlighted in blue, utilization of Safe Drinking Water Authority and resources. Underneath that, specifically in the statute, assist public water systems in the training and certification of their operators. I want to mention capacity development has annual reports as well, because they are also a grant condition of the Drinking Water State Revolving Loan Fund. And as part of that, operator certification programs have huge amounts of data, whether it's how much training goes on, how many people attend the training, classification of systems, all sorts of really good information that I think the capacity development folks can use. And then on top of that, of course, those are implementation reports. On top of that, you have the report to the governor, which I think is a very important report because it is a report that goes from the director of the agency where the drinking water program is to the governor of the state. And this is on the efficacy of the strategy and the progress toward improving technical, managerial, and financial capacity in public water systems in the state. And I think it's really crucial with all the public health information that the operator certification programs have. It would be very good to help out with that report to the governor. And that's done every 3 years. Parts of the drinking water program that I looked at: rule implementation, enforcement, data management, and field services. These are different parts that really have some either impact on the operator certification program or the operator certification program has impact on. Of course, with field services, sanitary surveys being done, and of course, operators is one of the eight elements of the sanitary survey. Enforcement, not in the baseline standards, you have enforcement on a lot of enforcement on operators, but there's also enforcement on systems dealing with the operator certification program. And as I mentioned before, rule implementation with the current and future rules that are coming into play. Just really quick here, operators and regulation. I just want to mention the federal regulations, the 40 CFR Part 141, the drinking water one, mentions operators 29 times. Specifically, there are two regulations that specifically say, one says qualified operator, the other one says qualified personnel, dealing with surface water systems and systems adding chemical disinfectant. And then the upcoming RTCR actually does have certified operator mentioned in it. Here are your headquarters and regional contacts. Some of these are, there's a couple of them, Region 3 along with Region 6. I think Region 10 and myself are both OpCert capacity development. And what I wanted to do too is leave you with this. Final thought from Jenny Belansky, who headed up the program initially and actually worked on the baseline standards and the final editions. So I think this report should focus on the state's ongoing commitment to have excellent operator certification programs, and I also believe that EPA headquarters and regions should do everything we can to encourage states to continue down that path. And with that, thank you.
All right, Bob, thank you very much. I just want to remind everybody, if you have any questions for Bob, just type them into the questions pane, and we will be asking him questions at the end of the session. But right now, I'd like to turn your attention to our next presenter, who is Andy Berrien-Brock of Ohio. And Andy is currently the manager of the Operations, Resiliency, and Certification section for the Ohio EPA's Division of Drinking and Groundwaters. So I guess you could say Andy's a triple threat guy. Prior to working with Ohio EPA, Andy worked for 11.5 years with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. And he's one of the few people that I've ever heard of who has migrated from Florida to somewhere else. I have to wonder if he just got his Miamis confused. I don't know. Anyway, when he's not being a dedicated drinking water program employee, Andy plays Special Olympics golf with his brother-in-law, and they have won several state Special Olympics gold medals. So, Andy, I turn the microphone over to you.
Thank you, Bridget. Just to build a little bit on what Bob went through, I'll be going through baseline standards since this is kind of Operator Certification 101 for all of you that are new out there in operator certification, and kind of go over what we do in Ohio to meet those baseline standards, some of the things that we have, go over some of the programs that we're implementing, and so you can kind of see what we do. Everybody doesn't have to be the same, but it's always kind of a good idea or a nice thing to see what other people are doing and kind of learn from the other states. And that will be a great thing, I think, when we get to Dallas, that you as new operator certification people will get to see some of that when we're there and get to feed off some of the other operator certification folks that are out there. Next slide. So I'll just be going through the baseline standards that Bob described and then kind of talking about what Ohio does to meet those baseline standards. Our operator certification program was established in 1935, so it's been out there for a while. It's not a new program. Our operator certification programs are identified. We do both water and wastewater operator certification. So we are authorized in both our statute for drinking water and our statute for wastewater. So we have dual authorization through two different statutes. Ohio has approximately 12,000 certified operators that we regulate. So we've got a big job to deal with. Next slide. Classification of systems and facilities and operators. We have established the classification of our facilities in our rules. So all the facilities classifications are established in rule. Other programs may use things like point sheets or something like that to develop. But in our case, we decided it would be the best thing to do to put it in rule, make it very clear. If you have a certain type of facility, then this is what classification you are. It helps engineers and communities plan for the future, what types of operators they'll need, because they can easily identify what their systems are. They don't have to worry about going through a point scheme where they may not calculate correctly, and in the end, the classification may come up differently. So we put that all out there. It's based on size, complexity of treatment, and the potential risk to health. We have 14 classifications. That's both water and wastewater. On the water side, we have 7 classifications, 5 different classifications for our water systems, and then 2 classifications for our distribution systems. We have operator requirements for all those systems. Obviously, we require that each one of those classified systems has an operator of record that is of a class equal to or greater than the facility. But we've also implemented minimum staffing requirements at our facilities. So all of our facilities have some type of minimum staffing required. That means the operator has to visit a certain number of days for a certain period of time per week. So we have that out there. A lot of states don't, but we do have that out there. It helps us in terms of enforcement and ensuring that operators are actually visiting the facilities. We've defined available because that baseline standard talks about you should have an operator available for each shift. For us, available means able to be contacted 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in order to make operating decisions in a timely manner. Next slide. Operator qualifications. We've established operator qualifications in our rule. We have an education requirement. All our operators have to have a high school diploma or the equivalent. We have experience requirements for each level of certification that we have. And then we've added some other criteria into our rules as well. Things that relate to American Disabilities Act. We require that operators be able to read and understand the rules. They be able to perform mathematical calculations. We heard a little bit earlier there'll be mathematical calculations and doing calculations at the workshop in Dallas. And then being able to complete and maintain records at their facilities to ensure that we have proper operations going on. So we make sure that they can demonstrate they can do all those things before they can take our exam as well. As far as exam validation or exam question validation, I could probably talk for a couple of hours on this. It's a very detailed subject. I'll always throw it out there. When I first started this, I never knew that there was a whole group of people who study exam validation, psychometricians. You can go to college and study to be one of these people. I can't imagine what that's like. Hopefully none of you are psychometricians. But in getting through that, you have to do some different things. In Ohio, we conduct a job analysis. We work with the Ohio State University, who has a whole school that is geared towards doing this. We bring in our operators, we review each classification, we look at what they do on a daily basis, and that gives us a job analysis. From there, we do a task analysis. What are the most important tasks they perform? And from that, we build what we call a need-to-know criteria. It's basically an outline of what each operator needs to know for each level of exam to be in charge of their facilities. Then, from that need-to-know criteria, we develop questions. The questions are geared towards those need-to-know criteria, the different items in the need-to-know. We put together those questions. We reference them to some standard reference material. A lot of times we're using California State books or AWWA books so that we have a good reference base on why we're asking those questions. And then from there, we develop our exams based on an exam guideline that goes back to those tasks that people do and what they do more often. So we focus our questions based on the things they do more often. And then after that, once we give exams, we evaluate those exams to make sure that those exams are testing what we want to test, that the questions we have are good questions, and that everything that we're doing is getting us the type of operator we want to see in the field. So that's a long, involved process. There's a lot of details to those. I don't have time in this webinar to go through those things, but if you're interested, you can certainly feel free to contact me, and I can go through what we do related to doing all those different things. Next slide. Grandparenting, just a quick point there. We didn't have much in the way of grandparenting except for those very small system operators, those less than 3,300 operators. When we put that into our rules, we allowed operators that were working at facilities to continue working at those facilities. I believe at the time we grandparented about 1,100 operators. We have requirements that they renew their certificates and continue to renew, but I think that number has dropped now to about 100 people who are still out there grandparented. They can only operate at the facility where they started. They can't go out and operate other facilities. So we should be done with all of our grandparented operators probably in the next 5 to 6 years, I would believe. Next slide. Enforcement. Enforcement's a big part of a program. In our rules, we have provisions that allow our director to suspend or revoke certificates. We have a very active enforcement program. We take a number of enforcement actions every year. We probably take full-blown enforcement where we're doing something with somebody's certificate. Probably 8 to 10 times a year there's a certificate having an action taken on it. But on the other side, we are issuing a lot of warning letters and non-compliance letters to operators, letting them know things they are doing incorrectly. We've developed an enforcement matrix that gives us kind of a way to outline how we're going to do our enforcement. We can look at what the violations that happened were. We assess a potential for harm and the deviation from the rules, and based on that, we come up with a suggested enforcement action. So that's something that's out there that's working very well for us. Next slide. Renewal. We have requirements that every operator renew their certificates. Our certificates are renewed every 2 years. Associated with that, each level of certification, each classification has its own number of required continuing education units operators are required to get. In Ohio, we call those contact hours. And based on that, certificate renewals, operators pay a fee, they document their contact hours, and then they can get their certificates renewed. Our contact hour courses are approved by us. Every course gets approved by Ohio EPA in one form or fashion. We look at relevance to the operation of water and wastewater facilities. So courses have to be relevant to that operation of those facilities. And we assign subjects. Essentially, we assign operation and maintenance or other to our courses. We have a requirement that says every operator has to get at least 50% of their contact hours in operation and maintenance related contact hours. That way they aren't focusing on safety training or OSHA courses, things like that. They are getting some operation and maintenance courses every time they renew. Next slide. The resources needed is a standard, a baseline standard that's out there. Our program has 4 full-time staff members and then some associated other staff that assist, but right now we have 4 full-time staff members dealing with those 12,000 operators. Next slide. Recertification. For people who fail to renew, we have a procedure in place or rules in place that tell operators what they need to do. For ours, it's pretty simple. They just have to retest. There isn't anything else. They have to meet the experience requirement and then go retake the exam and pass the examination again. An interesting point to that is a lot of times operators who had gotten certified many years ago don't like this and have to deal with it, but it is something that is in place for our recertification process to meet that baseline standard. Another standard that's out there is when we revoke a certificate. Revocation is permanent, and we don't allow operators to retest if their certificates have been revoked. So generally in those cases, we are taking action for the worst violations for those revocations. Next slide. Stakeholder involvement. We have what we call an Operator Certification Advisory Council. That's an 8-person group made up of stakeholders. They come from the water, the wastewater, and the engineering industry. We also have members from our program areas, our drinking water and wastewater program areas that are a part of that. They provide guidance to the Operator Certification Unit, and they help us out with some of the things that we do. But they're just there as a sounding board and to give ideas. They provide input to us. They help develop questions. They help with our exam reviews when we're reviewing the statistics of our exams. They help us look at those questions and determine whether or not questions are valid. We also involve all the stakeholders that we have. A number of different groups, organizations that are related to operators, the Ohio American Water Works Association, the Ohio Water Environment Association, Ohio Rural Water Association, the Association of Metropolitan Wastewater Authorities, all those other types of groups out there. We involve them on a continuous basis. We listen to them. We ask their input for things that we are doing. So we are continuously having stakeholder involvement outside of just our rulemaking process. Next slide. Program reviews. Internal program reviews, we do that. We use our Operator Certification Advisory Council. We use our staff. We are constantly looking at our process and trying to make it better. We do that, like I said, annually. And go over those things. External reviews has always been kind of a nebulous issue out there with US EPA and what should constitute an external review. And there have been things, I have seen things from just asking questions to having a full-blown review by another program be used as an external review. We currently have those stakeholder groups I talked about earlier. Help us review our program and provide suggestions to improve our program. There are some new things out there to assist programs with external reviews. I've been part of the OPCERT Re-Energizing Work Group that US EPA has been having. There is a new draft document that's out there, the suggested methods for review of operator certification programs. So that's something out there that can guide you in an external review. And there's also the Association of Boards of Certification actually provides a service where you can pay for an external review by association members. Part of that, you can use state set-aside funds to help fund your external reviews. So that's something, I think Bob talked about some of the set-aside funds and that they were out there and available. So that's something you can use to help you pay for those things. Next slide. And then the annual reports. Bob talked about annual reports and getting those in. US EPA has to approve them by September 30th. I think ours is always, unfortunately, I procrastinate, and ours is always somewhere in that September timeframe, so it makes it hard for Jennifer, our person, to get them approved. But this is an ongoing thing. Usually they're in a pretty standard format. We provide a lot of information in our annual report that documents what goes on. In our report, we include our wastewater information just so everybody knows that we do that as well. But I think these are valuable documents just to show what's going on with the program, what things we're doing, the different types of operators we're dealing with, and what we're seeing in terms of trends. Next slide. In Ohio, operator certification coordinates with our capacity development folks very well. Actually, the person who is in charge of capacity development used to be my supervisor. So we coordinate all the time. Her office is right next to mine. We do the technical, managerial, and financial, the TMF. We have a new process where we do capability screenings on facilities. When we're seeing they're starting to have problems, we have various questions that we go through and address. Those look at the technical, managerial, and financial aspects of a facility. As a group, we have a capacity development group that works on those. I am part of that group. And then we have continuing education courses that are related to the managerial and financial aspects of water systems that we have approved, and we have helped our RCAP folks develop. So those courses are out there. They're free courses that can be taken by people. So those are very helpful, and that's another part of the coordination that we do with our capacity development folks. Next slide. Should be it. Here's Bob and my contact information if you're interested, and don't get your questions answered today. But with that, I think I'll turn it back over to Anthony and be ready for questions.
Okay, actually, it's going to be Bridget, not Anthony, but I have been monitoring the questions as they have been coming in. And we do have a question, we have several actually, but Andy, I think the first one is directed to you. And one of the states is curious as to what kind of role, if any, ABC or another industry group plays with respect to your certification and examination portion of your program, and does that, or how does that, assuming that it does, free up demands on staff time and resources? So it's a multi-pronged question.
All right. I will give a multi-pronged answer. We have two things. One, we have our state-developed exams in Ohio that we call them our paper and pencil examinations. We give those twice a year. We develop those questions. That's what I talked about in terms of developing the job analysis and the need-to-know criteria. And then we have also, in the past couple of years, implemented another program where we have our third-party exam provider exams. We do not have a contract with ABC. We have actually approved them to be an exam provider in Ohio. So operators go directly to ABC. They pay ABC. They don't mess with us or pay us to take the exams. We have reviewed their exam data banks, and our advisory council did that, reviewed those, determined what exam data banks were equivalent to our levels of exams. We've set up that equivalency, and we allow operators to go out and take ABC exams through that third-party program and then come to us and request certification. So they go through a process where we review their application to determine they meet our experience requirements, passing the ABC exam, gets them the exam requirement, and then we can certify them.
Okay, thanks. The next question.
Maybe I should go further. I'm sorry, Bridget, because I think there was another. I answered all that, but I didn't answer the question of how has it freed up people's time.
Great. Okay.
It has freed up some of our time. It has allowed us to. We are seeing less applications for our paper and pencil, our traditional exams. We are seeing a lot more people taking those exams. They're a lot more convenient. Our paper and pencil exams are given here in Columbus at our state fairgrounds twice a year. The ABC exams are given at 5 locations around the state. Operators can go take them anytime they want. So it's much easier for them. It's closer to them. So we are seeing a lot of people liking to take those exams now. So we are seeing some of our time freed up in terms of doing our initial review of applications and dealing with putting together exams and things like that. Hopefully in the future we'll see even more reduction in that.
Okay. And as I started to say, thanks, Andy. That was really, I think, a very helpful answer. As I started to say earlier, I have a question now that kind of goes to both of you. So Andy, if you would start, and then Bob, if you could fill in. We have a state who is interested to know whether you in Ohio, or for Bob, anyone, say, in the region, is doing any of the OpCert training via webinar or other online formats, and if they are, which formats what kind of formats are you using, and is it working well?
All right. Our operator certification staff doesn't do much in the way of training operators. We have a large number of training providers in Ohio that do the trainings. However, we do allow webinars to be used for our OpCert training, or for people to use for their certification renewals. I can't tell you the specific programs that are being used, but I know that there are programs out there. Some of the things that we look for in approving those types of courses are that the training providers are able to track how long people are using the webinar as their front screen, and we're saying that at least 90% of a person's time must be spent with that as their front screen. They can't have a webinar up and then be doing email on the side and using that as what they're doing. So we make sure that anybody giving a webinar tracks that information and ensures that the operators are giving credit to are spending a vast majority of their time with that webinar as their front screen.
Okay. Bob?
Okay, sure. I don't really do a lot of training other than especially by electronic training. I have gone out to try to get electronic training accepted in the states, but they do not readily accept that. Somewhat similar things going on that Andy has mentioned about the screen time and making sure they're taking the training. It's very difficult through the webinar. If you're sitting down at a computer versus if you're in a room with somebody in it that can take down names and certificate numbers. So right now my understanding is electronic training is a little more difficult. I do know that some states do utilize the electronic training that the Sacramento training provides for both water and wastewater, but I guess that training is able to capture that the people are actually doing the training on it.
Okay, Bob, can you point to a particular state that might be doing this? Can you think of one offhand, or maybe let us know a little bit later?
Taking or accepting electronic training?
Mm-hmm.
I can only look at my 4 states, and right now they are not. I do know that Iowa is doing the electronic examination.
Okay.
But other than that, it's still a difficult thing to get them to accept the electronic training.
Yeah.
This is Matt. I think that information might be found in the OpCert compendium, or program summary, whatever we titled it.
Okay. All right. So if you haven't seen it already, the draft compendium will be shared at the upcoming workshop in December, so you can look for it there. But meanwhile, back at the ranch, Bob, I've got another question for you. Could you give some advice, or what kind of advice do you give a new coordinator when they join the team? A new state coordinator, a new state operator certification coordinator.
New state. I guess I've been fortunate. I haven't had. I think Darlene in Missouri would be the newest one, but she's been there for a while. So I mean, I guess what I would do is kind of focus on the baseline. Well, focus on their requirements and their and the baseline standards.
Okay.
I guess this is kind of hard as far as, it's, I guess the state making sure that they know, the federal requirements versus what they have in the state, and working with them and getting them to understand. But a lot of times what I've noticed is that in many cases, the state usually hires an operator who's been certified already for that position. So they already know information as far as the certification program, and also what's required by the state.
All right. So tell me this, Bob. When you are reviewing a state's program, what are some of the top, let's say, for example, the top 3 things that you look for? What are the things that give you that initial sense of confidence that, yes, this is going to be a good program review?
Well, most of the time, the states have things down pretty much about what I want. I like I focus on the baseline standards and the implementation of both baseline standards. Things like classification of systems, classification of operators, operators train, different classifications, enforcement is one of the items I look at now a little more closely, not just for operators, but also systems. I also look at one of the other interesting issues that keeps coming up to me is resources, and whether or not do the states have sufficient resources to implement their program. I also am looking at the review process. What are the states doing in order to look at their program, and whether it's functioning well, or whether they need more resources, or whether they need to look at exams. It's a variety of things, but I look for outputs. I look for what did they do over the last year, because that's what we're asked to do, and it's the implementation of the program.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to turn the spotlight now onto you, Andy. What do you wish that someone would have told you when you first became an operator certification coordinator? If someone had been standing there saying, congratulations, and now I have the one really solid piece of advice for you as a new coordinator, what would you have hoped that would be?
I wish there would have been a real clear guideline on how to meet all of the requirements of the baseline standards. But I mean, I don't think that's ever going to really be there. I think some of it is kind of nebulous and some of it's kind of out there. I think this would go back towards answering the question you just asked Bob. Some of the things that I think have been extremely helpful are getting to know other operator certification coordinators, getting to know what other states are doing. When I came to Ohio, I had a good knowledge of what Florida did because I had dealt with that in part of my past. So I built some of my knowledge here based on that knowledge and brought some of those things here to this program. But I think the more you can get to meet people and learn what other states are doing, whether it be in region meetings. Our region has now started doing routine meetings with all the staff from the regions. When I first started, that wasn't going on. If you're not, I know Bob does it with his folks. If your region's not doing that, that might be something to ask for, because I think those are great opportunities to get together with people and even in a small group and get to know who they are. Somebody asked about ABC earlier. Going to the ABC conferences, I think those are really good chances to learn. You might hear stuff about ABC specifically, but then you also hear about other programs and what they're doing, so you get to see a lot of differences. There are a lot of people that go to that conference, so you get to see some things there. So getting as much impact as you can from other programs and seeing what they do, and then kind of molding your own program to take some of the pieces and parts from all those programs you see. I think that's one of the best pieces of advice.
Okay. How about you, Bob? Do you have a good, since you're the sage of the OpCert Cap Dev world, do you have some good advice for a new operator? I mean, a new coordinator?
Oh, I think Andy has really come out with what is good, and that is discussing things, especially with other state coordinators and what they do. Also, the EPA coordinator, I think, is very helpful in discussing some of the things because they would also have very good knowledge of what's been going on in the state because they have to review the reports every year. I think that I still want to go back to what Jenny Belansky had said, and that, we recognize that the states had operator certification programs even before these guidelines came out. A lot of states improved their program with that, and then with the expense reimbursement grant, they improved those as well, the programs as well, through some of the funding that went through there in order to help the training and certification of operators. So I'm really pleased with what not just not just what's been going on in the program, but what the states have done with the program. They have really excelled, and I think that again those coordinators, especially in the same region with the same coordinator, is probably the best way to start. But other states are doing just good things as well. So the workshop is a great place to hear some of those things and to network with those other coordinators that will be there. So I mean, I again encourage, if you haven't put in your travel, I would encourage you to go to that because it is fantastic to kind of learn from what other states are doing.
Okay. Andy, we've got another question for you. And this takes advantage of your years of experience in the program, and that is, what is the biggest change that in your state's program that you have seen since you've been there? What advances have you all made from the early days?
Everything.
There is that.
some of the biggest changes since I've come, the whole exam validation, the things we've done with that, those are big changes. Putting information in place, putting our minimum staffing requirements into place. That was a big change. Requiring operators to actually be at the facility for a certain amount of time was a big change. And then I think one of our most, I guess a couple of other recent changes, this whole project we have with ABC being an approved exam provider. We were kind of forced, not necessarily forced, we were asked to develop a way to give our exams more time than twice per year and to give them in more locations than just our state fairgrounds. And in looking at that and the 4 staff members I had and what we could do with that program, there was no way in the world, and this might get to answer that previous question as well, there was no way in the world that we could have ever done that with the staff that we had, to offer tests more often in more places and make sure that we were doing everything. So by coming up with this, and it's a unique perspective, it's unique in the world, I don't think anybody else does this. Generally, ABC contracts with a state and you pay a contract fee to ABC. You know, I had heard problems with people because the contracts go up every few years, and then how do you pay for it? If you're trying to pay for it using your fees, then you have to raise fees. So, you know, we came up with this kind of way to do it where we approve them as an exam provider. It makes it a little bit different. We don't have to pay them, the operators pay them directly. I think that's a big deal. That's a brand new thing that I think is really good. And then our most recent innovation is going electronic, having all of our applications available electronically so people can apply online, pay online, and do that. That will be a major time saving to my staff. It will be a big thing once we are fully up and operators are fully using it. We just rolled it out this summer, but right now it's giving us a lot of benefits, and I think that's probably the biggest thing, is having that availability to pay online and to apply online. That will be a big time saving for my staff.
That's great. I mean, that really is. You guys have definitely done some innovative things since the early days, shall we say. So congratulations. I am not seeing any more questions in our Q&A box, and I think it's probably time that I turn this back to Anthony and EPA to kind of give us our final directions and talk us out. So Anthony?
Or EPA, if you guys are there.
Yep, we're here. Okay, let's see, there you go. Okay, so for those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Matt Reed. I'm at US EPA headquarters in DC, and I'm the National Operator Certification Program Coordinator. So I guess first I wanted to say thank you to both Andy and Bob for speaking today. Thank you to ASWA for putting this on, and thank you to all the participants that are out there in the audience. And on the screen now are all the contact information for all the regional coordinators, and my information as well down there, so everybody should feel free to contact your regional coordinator or myself. And lastly, I guess I just want to encourage everybody to please come to the, oh sorry, next slide. To the Capacity Development Operator Certification Workshop in December. There will be a lot of information getting passed, so it should be a good workshop, and hopefully all of you guys can make it. And with that, thank you, and I guess that's the end of the webinar.